Those in favor that clause 10 as amended stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Please, Secretary, take note of the amendment. It's a D. Clause 17 on page 4. Those in favor that clause 17 stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that clause 33 stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that clause 41 stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that clause 43 savings and transitional provisions stand part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that the short title stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that the explanatory memorandum stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that the long title on page 1 stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate, plenary.
Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues, I move that the Senate revert to plenary and report progress.
Your Minority Leader.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I ask to second the motion that the Senate revert to plenary to report progress. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that the Senate reverts to plenary for the chair to report progress, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The Senate in the Committee of the Whole considered the Federal Airport Authority of Nigeria Act Cap F5 LFN 2004 Repeal and Reenactment Bill 2022 and approved as follows. Long title as recommended. Clause 2 as recommended. Clause 10 as amended. Clause 17 as recommended. Clause 33 as recommended. Clause 41 as recommended. Clause 43 as recommended. Short title as recommended. Explanatory memorandum as recommended. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the Committee of the Whole? Thank you. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I move a motion that the bill be read now for the third time. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I rise to second the motion that this bill be now read a third time. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that this bill be now read the third time, say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to repeal the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria Act, Cap F5, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, to reenact the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria, to provide for the effective management of airports in Nigeria, and for related matters 2022. Third reading.
A bill for an act to repeal the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria FAN Act, Cap F5, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004 and enact the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria Act 2022 to provide for the effective management of airports in Nigeria and for related matters 2022. Third reading taken and the bill is passed. Thank you. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the second order of the day is the second reading of the Central Bank of Nigeria CBN Act, Amendment Bill 2022 SB 1049. Distinguished senators will recall that the bill was read the first time in this chamber on Wednesday, 21st September 2022. Mr. President may wish to invite Senator Umar Sadiq Suleiman to move the motion for the bill to be read the second time. I so move.
Distinguished Senator Sadiq Suleiman Umar.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues, I am Sadiq Suleiman Umar. I represent the good and decent people of Kwara North, and we all are. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I rise to lead the debate on a bill for an act to amend the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN Act number 7 of 2007, and for other related matters, 2022 SB 1049. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, permit me to lead the debate on this very important bill to amend the Central Bank of Nigeria CBN Act number 7 of 2007. The bill, which was read for the first time in this hallowed chamber on Wednesday, the 21st September 2022, is aimed at putting the institution in line with other similar institutions in the world. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the objective of this bill includes: 1, to enable the appointment of a person other than the governor as the chairman of the board of the CBN. 2, to divest the board of the powers of determining and fixing the salaries and allowances of its members. And 3, to consider and approve the annual budget of the bank, which lies solely with the National Assembly. In this regard, there arose the need for an enduring legal framework that will reposition CBN to be at par with other apex banks around the world. This bill seeks therefore to close the legal and administrative gaps that currently exist in the CBN Act, entrench good practices to allow proper oversight of the affairs of the bank, for a more comprehensive legislation that will bring it in conformity with the related laws and practices in Nigeria. I therefore seek the strong support of everyone to this second reading of this bill. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Distinguished Senator James Manager.
Mr. President, my highly respected colleagues, James Manager, Delta South. Mr. President, this is a very important amendment bill, because for some time now we have not been getting it right. The exchange rate today is gone up, and there are two ways of doing it. One is official, one is unofficial. So there's a lot of confusion, and that is creating a lot of problem for the country. So an amendment bill of this magnitude, particularly reason number 1, anybody enable the appointment of a person other than the governor of the CBN to be the chairman of the board. In fact, the 3 reasons given here are very important reasons. And therefore, these reasons for the amendment, in my humble view, is too dry. When the sponsor of the bill is talking about in other climes, one would have expected him to go into details of these other climes. We are talking about the CBN. So, and then when he's talking about the National Assembly approving the budget, there have been arguments for and against. So, in my humble view, this the reasons for amendment is just too dry, and it's something that we need to be told on this floor of the Senate why this amendment is germane at this point in time. So I am sorry, my dear colleague, In fact, with the reasons I've given, I refuse to agree with you on this particular amendment bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Barrow Jubril.
Thank you, Mr. President, for recognizing me. My name is Senator Barrow Jubril. I represent Kano North. Mr. President, permit me to commend the sponsor of this bill for bringing this very important bill forward at this time, because the Apex Bank is a very, very important entity to our country. In fact, it's very, very important to every country. Therefore, making sure that the laws governing its operation are made in such a way that will allow it to perform its function properly is something to be supported by all and sundry. I know in the corporate world that the chief executive of an entity can't be the chairman of that entity. And I'm sure as what this bill is trying to do is to kind of make the laws or amend the law governing this institution to go in conformity with what is obtainable in other climes in the world. I believe that this intendment is sound and is okay, and we should do all within our powers to make sure that we put this institution in the best position to perform its function. I call on my colleagues to support it so that it can go to the next stage. It's there that the nitty-gritty and the concern raised by my colleague, my senior colleague, will be addressed there. This is the second reason, and it might not explain all that is needed in the amendment of the bill, but by the time we move forward, all these little details will be available for all of us to see. But I think that we need to amend the law governing this institution so that what we are seeing today, the exchange rate instability and so on and so forth, by the time we give it the best law, put in the best position to perform its function, I think we'll be able to address these problems. I say so, Mr. President.
The DSP.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ovi Omo Agege, Delta Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, I can't help but align myself with the submissions of Senator James Manager. Mr. President, this is a very, very consequential amendment. One would expect, without having to wait for the outcome of the public hearing. This is our only opportunity. Most of us here in plenary. The next opportunity we have, Mr. President, will be the clause by clause consideration. And at that point, I know you will tell us that the period for debate right there has passed, and that is not.
Now I will only remind you. Okay, not tell you.
I don't believe that enough reasons, enough explanations has been advanced in this one-page lead debate to justify the passage of this bill for second reading at this particular time. And I looked around, to see whether Senator Ubasani is around, and I have not seen him. This is a very, very consequential amendment, Mr. President. I will, at the risk of saying that this thing should die, I will recommend that this thing be stepped down, so that we'll be given step down, so we can have more materials, to be able to make an informed judgment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Distinguished Senator Abaribe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Eina Abaribe, Abia South. I align myself fully with the DSP and Senator James Manager. Just like they have said, there's not enough reason for us to actually go into this matter to decide whether to go beyond this stage. I have heard from my very good friend Jubrin that in corporate organizations the MD is not the same thing as the chairman. This is not just a corporate organization. This is the Central Bank of Nigeria. Now, that is in charge of the reserve and in charge of everything. Now, on the matter of determining salaries and all that, that is not the key issue. The key issue is the management of myself and yourself and all of us, our incomes, expenditures, value of our currency. So, we just don't rush into, okay, let's just go ahead and do public hearing. No, sir. Before we agree on this, I need to know why you insist that the chairman can no longer be the chief executive. There must be stated reasons, because that will impact on our decision. And so, sir, I would suggest very respectfully that this be represented with all those reasons and all that clearly adumbrated, so that when we take this decision, we know we are taking the decision in the interest of the country. I so submit.
Senator Betty Apiafi.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Mr. President, I want to commend the Chairman Rules and Business for bringing up this very important amendment of the CBN Act. Ordinarily, I may not have supported this bill, but given the antecedents and what happened during the last runoff to the presidential election and the issues that came up with the Central Bank of Nigeria, where the governor of Central Bank of Nigeria was all over his photographs and electoral materials were all over the place. Yeah, in other climes, like Abaribe said, this is the Central Bank of Nigeria. In other climes, the Central Bank of Nigeria governor doesn't run for election or doesn't have political ambition. But we find ourselves in the situation we find ourselves now because of what happened recently. I personally have an amendment to the Central Bank Act, again, based on what happened in the last, some months before that. No, but I'm giving you the reason now. No, if he didn't, but what is it? No, you see, he's saying he wasn't put.
Senator Betty Apiafi, you are protected. Round up.
With the antecedents of what has happened in the last political fallout of the presidential primaries, I think we need to separate the duties of the central bank governor and that of the board, so that we have a situation where an individual in the central bank doesn't take a holistic decision that will affect the entire central bank. Remember, the Central Bank of Nigeria is where we keep electoral materials. It shook the nation because it was like people now started having doubts about the capacity of the Central Bank of Nigeria to keep electoral materials in the central bank. Having said that, I hope I have been able to convince the DSP and that we shall really allow this bill to go for public hearing. We'll get more information and then they will be properly convinced. But I've given them enough reason to believe that this bill should be allowed to go for second reading. I so move.
Well, before I call on the Senator Abdullah here to comment, let me say something regarding the submission by our colleague Senator Betty Apiafi. If one decides to print your pictures as posters, print or brand vehicles and airplanes and whatever, and put posters everywhere, and you don't come out yourself to say you are running. When I said I was running for the presidency, I was there. I went all over the place, even though some of our aspirants didn't travel, go out to campaign, but they admitted they were running. I think we should not link this bill with that incident. We should be looking at the merit of the bill, whether it is appropriate, whether it is going to be helpful, that the chairman of the governing board should be different from the governor of the CBN. I think this should be our focus rather than the kind of thing. Senator Abdullahi.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, this bill is a very important, raises a very, very important issue. I think we should not, under any circumstances, trivialize the issues that have been raised here. With all sense of responsibility, we are talking about an institution that manages the monetary policy of the country. And monetary policies involve exchange rates, inflation, banking, whatever transaction you are doing, in interest rates, internally in the country with other countries. Most countries manage their not just currencies, their economies, with very, very strong monetary instruments. For us to simply, on the basis of one sheet of paper, pass on a document, it's a second reading. I don't think we are doing this institution, we are doing justice to this institution, the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The issue that should come in the second reading should be a well-articulated, documented position on the current status of the central bank and its responsibilities vis-a-vis the responsibilities of central banks in other clients, like the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve in the US, the Bank of China, and other big world economies. Let's see how they are managing their own, how are we managing our own, and whether there is any substantive issue that warrants changes that we should make to make our own much more responsible. But for us to sit down here and allow this thing to go, I don't think it does justice, to the importance of this institution in the nation's political firmament. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Oji Ozokalo, Abia North. Mr. President, I stand to oppose this bill, that it should be stepped down, because, please order, because all the central banks in the world, you can check, any governor of the central bank is both the chairman of the bank and the chief executive. From Federal Reserve Bank to Bank of China to Bank of England to Bank of Canada. So Nigeria should not be different. If we had a loophole in our central bank, we should come together and put our hands together and make a new legislation that no central bank governor should, on his tenure, unless he resigns totally, should contest for president of Nigeria, or should have to go to any political issue. But all the central bank in the world are chaired by the governors of them. I so submit that you go back and look at this one-page document. It's not enough for us to go for security. Thank you, Mr. President.
Distinguished colleagues, for the second time, I will advise us to divorce this incident of contesting by the alleged contest by the governor of the central bank, because this should have nothing to do with what we are doing here. It's not one of the, it's not on the table. So I will advise us that we look at the arguments put by our colleagues, and here there are two things that we can do. Either that the sponsor of the bill decides to withdraw it for further legislative action and consultation, or that we put it to vote, which gives the risk of this bill failing. So I will first ask the sponsor of the bill if he thinks that our colleagues who said the bill should be withdrawn have a strong case, or I put the question. Distinguished Senator Sadiq Suleiman Umar, do you take the advice of withdrawing for further legislative action, or we put the question? No, it's for him to decide, please.
Mr. President, don't, nobody killing you. Yes, Mr. President.
No, please. Please, can we listen to him, please? Senator Abaribe, please, let's listen to him.
Mr. President, thank you very much for this opportunity. But the argument is very clear. What I seek for is very clear, and we all know what it is. Therefore, I believe there are enough distinguished senators that understand the challenge we are facing with the CBN. And the issues are very clear to me. Board chairmanship, the budget, clearly. So, put the question, Mr. President, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Distinguished colleagues, please, Senator Francis, please. Distinguished colleagues, we have listened to the interventions by our colleagues. Now, some said we should put the question, some said no, but we have come to a crossroad that we have to put the question. And the question is to allow the bill go for second reading. So it's not like it's a law already when it is passed. Members, distinguished colleagues, still have opportunity to make their cases during the public hearing, or indeed when the report is presented. So those in favor that this bill be now read a second time, say aye. Aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate. Chiwi, please.
Mr. President, distinguished senators,
please.
Number 7 of 2007, to enable the appointment of a person other than the governor as the chairman of the board, divest the board of the powers of determining and fixing salaries and allowances of its members, and considering and approving the annual budget of the bank, and for other related matters, 2022, SB 1049, second reading.
A bill for an act A bill for an act to amend the Central Bank of Nigeria CBN Act number 7 of 2007 to enable the appointment of a person other than the governor as the chairman of the board, divest the board of the powers of determining and fixing salaries and allowances of its members, and considering and approving the annual budget of the bank, and for other related matters, 2022 second reading. And the bill is referred to the Committee on Banking, Insurance and other financial institutions to report back within 4 weeks. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the third order of the day is the second reading of the Federal Polytechnic Cabo Establishment ETC Bill 2022 SB 34. Distinguished senators will recall that the bill was read the first time in this chamber on Thursday, 3rd October 2019. Mr. President, you may wish to invite Senator Barrow Jibrin to move the motion for the bill to be read the second time.
Distinguished Senator Barrow Jibrin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am Senator Barrow Jibrin. I represent Kano North. Mr. President, I stand to move that the second reading of the bill for the establishment of Federal Polytechnic Kano State be read the second time. I so move, Mr. President.
You may proceed, please. Present the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I stand to read the lead debate on a bill for the establishment of Federal Polytechnic Kano State 2022 SB 9. Mr. President, this polytechnic has already been established. What this bill is seeking to do is to give the legal backing for its establishment. Permit me, sir, to lead the debate of this very important bill for the establishment of the Federal Polytechnic Kabo. The bill was read for the first time in this hallowed chamber on Thursday, 3rd October 2019. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, this bill seeks to establish the Federal Polytechnic Kabo and make comprehensive provision for its due management and administration. The establishment of this institution is informed by the imperative to create more access to higher technical education in view of the large number of qualified candidates who are annually stranded in their failed attempts in gaining admission into higher institutions in the state, and to balance the geopolitical spread of higher institutions and other higher institutions are located in the north and the central senatorial district of Kano State. The objects of the polytechnic shall be to A, provide full-time or part-time courses of instruction and training in technology, applied science, commerce and management, and in such other fields of applied learning relevant to the needs of the development of Nigeria in the area of industrial and agricultural production and distribution, and for research in the development and adaptation of techniques as the Council may from time to time determine. B, to arrange conferences, seminars and study groups relative to the fields of learning specified in paragraph A of this subsection 1. C, to perform such other functions as in the opinion of the Council may serve to promote the objectives of the Polytechnic. D, encourage advancement of learning and to hold out to all persons without distinction of race, creed, sex or political conviction the opportunity of acquiring higher and liberal education. F, encourage and promote scholarship and conduct research in restricted fields of learning and human endeavor. G, relate its activities to social, cultural, and economic needs of the people of Nigeria, and H, to undertake other activities appropriate for a polytechnic of the highest standard. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, our economy has very high potentials and requires high level technical, scientific, and administrative skills to drive it. The establishment of this polytechnic will go a long way in achieving these targets. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, this bill is well organized for its very own purpose of a modern academic and research institution. The objectives of the polytechnic are articulated above, are supportive of its mission and broad vision of a modern institution that will develop world-class human resources that can sustainably manage our nation's economy by providing technical and management expertise at the highest level. The polytechnic is therefore to further advance knowledge through research and nurture unique innovations, entrepreneurship, and wealth management in its core area of interest. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the enactment of this bill will help in transforming the educational fortunes in Nigeria, in producing the desired manpower and expertise that Nigeria is yearning for. Mr. President, my highly respected colleagues, in line with Order 76, subsection 3 of our standing rules, the financial compendium is hereby attached. I urge you all to support this bill for second reading. Mr. President, as I said earlier, this potential has already been established. What we are trying to do with this bill is to give it letter backing. Mr. President, I say sorry. Thank you.
Distinguished Senator Ibukula Amosu.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ibukula Amosu, I represent Ogun Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, let me second this motion on the establishment of the Federal Polytechnic Cabo in Kano State, ably put forward by Senator Barab Jubrin. Mr. President, let me say I personally am against the proliferation of tertiary institutions. But much as I am against proliferation of our tertiary institutions in Nigeria, the truth is the truth. There are still thousands, if not millions, of our youth, able-bodied men and women, that when they wake up every day, they don't have anything doing. And it is in our interest to create opportunities like this for them. And anything that has to do with education, of course, you will find me in the vanguard and in the forefront of promoting such courses. Mr. President, when you look into this, something even struck me. The mover of the motion has said that I think these universities in the south, is it in the north? In the north. And he has said that in Kano, there is a genuine need to have a institution like this for our people there, particularly the younger ones there. And in any case, when you look at this, a polytechnic, it has dwelt so much on technology, it has dwelt so much on applied sciences, it has dwelt so much on even management. And I think if we create opportunities and avenue like this for them, of course it will be a win-win scenario. Mr. President, every day we complain about insecurity. There's a nexus between insecurity and not having things to do. When we create avenues like this for them.
Chief Whip, distinguished Senator Sani Musa, please, you can sit down and talk in a low tone.
Especially Nigeria as a whole. So, Mr. President, I want to wholeheartedly support this bill, and I want to enjoin my colleagues to support it so that it can pass for second reading and it can be appropriately referred to the committee that we will now put together the public hearing on this. So, Mr. President, I so support. Thank you.
Distinguished Senator Christopher Stephen Akpeyo.
Thank you, Mrs. President of the Senate and my distinguished colleagues. My name remains Senator Christopher Stephen Akpeyo. Mr. President, this is a very lofty bill indeed. I listened to distinguished Senator Amusun saying that he actually had a dissatisfaction in the issue of establishment of tertiary institution. But Mr. President, Nigeria cannot move to the moon. Nigeria cannot take our people from poverty into prosperity when we cannot produce a pin. The only way forward for us to produce pin is through technical education. The only way we can move out of the present predicament that we have found ourselves is through technical education when we go into manufacturing, so that our input, whatever we produce, will be matched with our export capability, and then we have more revenue to the nation. So, Mr. President and my distinguished colleagues, this is a very lofty idea. The establishment of a federal university, particularly in Kano, where you have a very large population. So, Mr. President, I'm in sync with those who have supported this bill to go through a second reading. So, Mr. President, I am in support of it. I'm in support of this establishment so that we can train people who will come and drive our steel rolling mill in Ajakuta that has been moribund over the years since the establishment. So I'm in support of this bill. And I urge my other colleagues to support this bill to go through second reading. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Deputy Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues.
Distinguished Senator Solomon Adiola, please.
Thank you.
Senator Baribe, you can take a seat and then discuss. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I'm Aliu Sabi Abdullahi. I represent Niger North. Mr. President, let me join the previous speakers to commend distinguished Senator Barrow Jibrin for this very timely legislative intervention. As it has been said, this institution is in existence, and all that this bill seeks to do is to formalize the legal framework for its operation. Mr. President, let me also at this juncture note that in the debate by the sponsor of this bill, I want to say that his allusion to other higher institutions are located in the north of Kano, I think was what he must have intended to say is in the south. Okay, because the northern part is the one that actually requires this, so that should be corrected in the, your report, please. I think in that the lead debate where he talked about the higher institutions are located in the north is actually supposed to be allocated in the south, because the bill he seeks to have now is actually the one in the north. Mr. President, this is a straightforward bill. The importance of polytechnics for middle-level manpower development, especially in an industrial city like Kano, I think is one that is quite timely. And given the institution that legislative backing, we further strengthen the operations of the institutions for the purpose for which they are set up. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, with these few comments, I support this bill and urge that other colleagues support it to be read the second time.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that this bill be now read a second time, say aye. Aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to establish the Federal Polytechnic, Cabo, Kano State, to provide full-time courses in technology, applied science, management, and other fields of studies, and to make provisions for the general administration and for other related matters 2022, SB 34, second reading.
A bill for an act to establish the Federal Polytechnic Cabo, Kano State, to provide full-time courses in technology, applied science, management, and other fields of studies, and to make provisions for the general administration and for other related matters 2022 second reading taken. And the bill is referred to the Committee on Tertiary Institutions and third fund report by within 4 weeks. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the first order of the day is the second reading of the Rotation of Power Bill 2022, SB 1040. The distinguished senators will recall that the bill was read the first time in this chamber on Tuesday, 26 July 2022. Mr. President, I wish to invite Senator Moro Patrick Abba to move the motion for the bill to be read.
Distinguished Senator Patrick Abba Moro, Benue South.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Mr. President, I seek your indulgence to allow me to lead this debate on this very vital national issue of power rotation, especially as it seeks to allay the fears of minority groups, especially in the states, to access power and contribute their quota to the development of our country. Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, this bill was mentioned and read for the first time in this very revered chamber on Tuesday, 26 July 2022. Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, the one and sole intent of this bill is to enact a legislation that will seek to amend the provisions of the Constitution to provide for the rotation of power among the geopolitical zones, governorship among the senatorial districts and federal constituencies in general elections in Nigeria. This bill has become imperative considering the controversies trailing the nomination of persons for elections into various offices, especially the offices of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and governors of various states of the Federal Republic. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, let me humbly remind us that in our nation's constitution, there is what is called the federal character principle, which requires the fair and equitable representation of different ethnic and regional groups in the composition of all tiers of government. This was designed by the framers of the Constitution to ensure that there is no predominance of persons from a few states or a few ethnic groups or sectional groups in running the affairs of the country. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, one of our duties as legislators is to protect the Constitution of our dear country, Nigeria. And one way to do that is to support this bill because power rotation is a necessary lubricant that oils the federal character principle as enshrined in the Constitution. Mr. President, my very revered colleagues, in Nigeria, a multi-ethnic and diverse nation, the need to alternate power across the zones and governorship among the senatorial districts of the country cannot be overemphasized. This is because power rotation can be a veritable tool for our national integration, unity, inclusion, peace, and political stability. May I mention that for democracy to thrive anywhere, it must be adapted to suit the political reality of its environment. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, for the progress of our democracy, equity and equality should define its process. Mr. President, my highly respected colleagues, time has come for us to reach certain peculiar compromises in respect to our political reality for the sake of our cohesion as a people.
And one way to achieve this is through power rotation amongst all the geopolitical zones. Governorship among the senatorial districts and federal constituencies of our country. Rotation of power is the strongest antidote against secessionist threats in this country. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, certain zones and regions felt marginalized and denied political power, and this has led to emotive violence and social unrest. The way forward to bring about political stability in the country, to give every section, zone or group a sense of belonging and inclusion, is to embrace rotation of political power with open hands. May I humbly submit, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, that there is no section or zone in Nigeria that does not have the best person with the requisite competence, capacity, and character to lead at various political levels in Nigeria. Mr. President, my very respected colleagues, for the purpose of preserving our democracy, I urge you all to support the power rotation bill and pass it accordingly. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, for the avoidance of doubt, this bill is not intended for the 2023 general elections, because by the time this bill runs its full cycle, the 2023 general elections would have been concluded. Thank you for listening to me.
The senior Senator Adi Young. Is your mic not working? Is a majority person sitting near you?
He's using his own.
You can speak from where Senator Abumoro spoke.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I remain Senator Adi Gyang, representing the blessed and very good people of Plateau North. Mr. President, I rise to support the reading of this very bill and its passage on second reading that has to do with the rotation, power rotation of elective offices in this nation. And I think the bill has been brought forward so that it can help us in the process of managing our diversity and plurality as a nation. Mr. President, as a multi-ethnic and multi-religious nation, managing and harnessing our diversity, to me, can be an asset rather than allowing it to be a liability. And of course, the effective management of our diversity is what this bill seeks to address in such a way that feelings and perceptions of marginalization at all levels, at state and federal levels, and even within constituencies, can be addressed by the passage of this bill. Of course, our political parties have within their constitutions tried to address this issue by adopting the principles of rotation to address this particular issue. But I think by bringing a statute to formalize it is something that I would want to reinforce so that ethnic minorities that are suffering the issues of this perception of marginalization can, on reliance of this very enactment, would forever be grateful to the 9th Assembly, the Senate, for bringing the issues of equity. Of course, we know that equity is not equality. But when fairness and issues of are addressed to ensure fairness, that is what this bill is advocating, and that is what I am supporting by this presentation. I therefore would want our colleagues that we support the enactment of this legislation that will be very, very historic in this nation and will be associated with the very good work of the 9th Assembly, and I therefore submit that we support this bill on its passage on second reading. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Balai Bunala.
Well, Mr. President and my distinguished colleagues, I am happy that I have been given opportunity to say a word or two in respect of this bill. I'm equally happy that the Senate President is a minority.
Thank you very much.
To amplify this issue, we all knew that the last president of this country, President Ibele Jonathan, was equally a minority. And we never had a bill of this nature for him to emerge as president. When the framers of our constitution decided to create the various offices under the constitution and gave us a federal constitution and made prescription as to the requirement of each office created by the constitution, it was to further enhance the unity of this country. And Mr. President, you will remember that no matter how we try to allow our sentiments to drive our desire for a very united, equitable country, we equally have a responsibility to balance that with the oath of office we have taken as senators of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, i.e., to uphold, protect, and defend the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And where the Constitution specifically has prescribed the requirement for emerging into each of the offices created by the Constitution, it may be very, very difficult for this Senate to, by way of legislation, upset that provision of the Constitution. The Constitution being the grand norm of our country, we are bound by it. This is really a beautiful, beautiful pursuit, but the framers of our Constitution appear to be wiser by taking the position that they took in the insertions of those provisions to enhance our desire to live as a united country. I can tell you, Mr. President, I will be the happiest person if this bill, for example, can go through the constitutional sieving to exist as a legislature in this country. But alas, I am tied by the oath of office I have taken as a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And therefore, I'm really in difficulty to promote this bill on this floor. Mr. President, the additional debt...
So you are against it? Are you against it?
You see, sir,
You don't land with your head.
the danger of including rotation of holding political office in our law will do a great violence to our desire to live as a united country. and democracy being a recurrent suspicion whereby more than half the people are right more than half the time, must be given the benefit of choosing their leaders at each point in time. Just like we decided in this chamber to choose you knowing fully well you are a minority. So let me respectfully say that, Mr. Senate President, not only me, this Senate cannot legislate on this matter without doing a great violence to our Constitution. Maybe this is the diplomatic way to put it. Thank you very much.
DSP. You raise your hand. Are you?
Thank you, Mr. President. Of the Omo Agege Delta Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, let me begin by saying that on a good day, I ordinarily would align myself with the intent behind this bill. Ordinarily. But Mr. President, I'm taken aback. This is not a bill for constitutional amendment. It is not a bill to amend the Constitution. It is not. I think Senator Moro ought to know very well. As my brother and colleague alluded to earlier, the Constitution is very, very clear. To deprive somebody of the right to run for office through a provision of a piece of legislation enacted by the National Assembly, which is contrary to the provision of the Constitution, will render that very act of the National Assembly null and void as it should be. Not too long ago, we had this exercise to amend the Constitution. I would have expected, this is a good bill. It's a very, very good bill. I would have expected Moro to bring this bill, and most of us would have gone for it. But while waiting for the next opportunity, Mr. President, at least until Senator Nara spoke, I was very, very curious that everybody who was speaking and contributing were from the other side, the PDP. And I found it very, very interesting. Interesting because we in APC, we believe in the intent behind this bill. That is why after, excuse me, let me speak, I'm on the floor. That is why, Mr. President, after 8 years of President Muhammadu Buhari, all of the governors of southern Nigeria, they met in Asaba. Excuse me, I have the floor, and I have the protection of Mr. President. You know, they met, Mr. President, I'm sure I have the protection.
DSP, you are protected. Senator Beta Piafi, stop harassing the DSP, please.
In Asaba, the Delta State, all the governors, our elected governors, people were elected to govern us in the entire southern Nigeria, they all met and took a position as enshrined pretty much in this lead debate. Mr. President, not only that, our governors in the north of APC extraction also took the position as enshrined. Excuse me, I have the floor.
DSP. DSP. Yeah, you have. Okay.
The mic, So all the governors in northern Nigeria of APC extraction aligned with the position of the governors of southern Nigeria, irrespective of political parties, and supported the content of this very bill. But, Mr. President, we now know what has happened. These people here, our colleagues on the other side, Mr. President, if they are serious, the first thing they need to do is to plead with their presidential candidate to step down from the race, so that power after 8 years can come to southern Nigeria in line. Mr. President, I have the floor, Mr. President. I have the floor. You know, that is, Mr. President, we don't need to codify. Why are we waiting to codify this into law? Charity begins at home. Why waiting to codify this into law? Why don't we do what is right? Why don't we do what is needful? Having had power for 8 years, power should come to the south. So they should tell their presidential candidate to step down from the race. Thank you, Mr. President.
Please, Senator Dambul Kachwa.
Mr. President, thank you very much for recognizing me. Thank you very much for recognizing me. My name is Senator Adamu Mohammed Bulkachua, representing Bauchi North Senatorial District. Mr. President, I would beg my distinguished colleagues, very distinguished colleagues, for us to be more serious in debates that concern the Constitution of Nigeria and any matter, according to lawyers and the Constitution itself, any matter brought for lawmaking that contradicts the Constitution is ultra virus. The point, the DSP...
Point of order, Senator Okejeff. We have a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. President Okejeff. I represent Benue Northwest. Mr. President, I've recent...
No, order what, please? Where, which part of the Constitution? Side the Constitution. You have to... The Senator Okejeff, you said point of order, I recognize you. And you know the procedure. No, you are not going to proceed. You are not going to proceed. You have to cite the section of the Constitution you are raising point of order. Okay, you may read. You should read it.
The National Assembly may, subject to the provisions of this Constitution, alter any of the provisions of this Constitution. Yes. That is what this bill seeks to do. And there's nothing that says it must be done at a particular time. So when everybody stands up and proceeds as if a constitutional amendment cannot be brought at this time, that's not fair. Or as if bringing this bill, it contradicts what is existing. You can amend any section of the Constitution at any time.
Do you want me to rule? Okay. You see, as far as I can see, our colleague, the sponsor of this bill, has not shown or referred to any section of the Constitution that he wants amended. He's looking for a law, not a constitutional amendment or alteration. And when our colleagues will say this will run contrary to the provision of the Constitution, they mean he is not asking for any constitutional amendment. Therefore, this bill or the law he's seeking will run into serious and massive collision with provisions of the Constitution. And that's the issue our colleagues are raising. So I think we need to address it. It's not a generic thing that whenever you present a bill, it's changing the Constitution. No, you have to refer to the relevant sections that you want amended, and there's none here. But that is not to say that this debate will not go on. Senator Muhammad Adam Bulkachwa is on his feet, and he will continue with the debate. So I've taken note of your order. Senator Adam Bulkachwa.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, the Constitution itself came about through series of constitutional conferences after series of military regimes. And I had the privilege of being part of one of such constitutional conferences. And it was as a result of a decision during constitutional conference that political...
Senator Abamoro, you want the debate to stop or... Oh, okay. Point of order. Senator Abamoro.
You will now come back.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I come under Order 42 on personal explanation to elucidate on the bill that I have proposed. Mr. President, listening to my colleagues and the explanations that they have given as to their opposition and support for this bill, I seek the indulgence of Mr. President and my colleagues to step down this bill and possibly represent it in the proper manner in subsequent sittings. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. I think this is a peace move. Even though you didn't discuss the terms of what you are going to say with me, but there is no harm accepting the point of order and seeking for stepping down of the bill. So I will still ask Senator Adam Bulkachwa to round up now that the course of action has to be in a different way. Rather, Senator Adam Bulkachwa, you may round up. There is no bill on the floor anymore.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and distinguished colleagues. I'm happy that all the other arguments that I had intended to present against this bill are now no more necessary. So I therefore express my gratitude to the mover of the bill for withdrawing it. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, I want to thank Senator Patrick Abamoro for coming out with that his bill and then withdrawing when he noticed that the bill needs further legislative action. But let me say this. The heterogeneous nature of our country or our people can hardly be resolved by just laws. Someone said, I'm a minority. Yes, I am. Today, by the grace of God and your endorsement, I'm the Senate President. This is to say that minorities can still get into positions that would ordinarily be seen to be for the majority. I think what we need to do is to be very conscious of each other's position and try to be fair and equitable. If we go along strictly by law with over 450 ethnic groups and probably far more dialects, the situation may be endless, because if you go to one community and you say you are picking from the community, they will tell you this dialect is different from that, and so on and so forth. But we know what is right. We know what is right. So in addition to trying to make laws, we should also emphasize on doing the right thing, because this is what would stabilize us. Laws alone cannot. And of course, there are serious efforts in the Constitution to ensure that both majority and minorities get fair deal. And I think we can achieve that as much. I don't want to go into what the DSP has said. That's another side of the debate and argument. But I think we can do better, even with our Constitution. Thank you very much. So, Senator Abomoro, you can do further consultations, and if you still feel strongly about this, you can bring back your reformed bill to the floor for debate. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, if we look at the paper 5 and the 6, they are actually from the same person. So what I want to do is to move that we take the two papers at the same time, so that Mr. President can come down to the committee of the whole only once, because it's the same report. So I move that we take the two papers at the same time.
Distinguished Senator Ibrahim Yahya Olurogbe, Kwara Central. Is he around? Senator Yahya Olurogbe is not in. Is anybody presenting on his behalf? Okay, Senator Sadiq Suleiman Umar, Kwara North.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues, I am Sadiq Suleiman Umar. I represent the good and decent people of Kwara North, and we all are. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I rise to present the report of the Committee on Health, Secondary and Tertiary, that the Senate do receive and consider the report of the Committee on Health, Secondary and Tertiary on National Health Act number 82014, Amendment B 2022, SB 603, as well as that the Senate do receive and consider the report of the Committee on Health, Secondary and Tertiary on the Federal University of Medicine and Medical Sciences, Egbe, Kogi State, Establishment Bill 2022, SB 896. I so move, Mr. President.
Sorry, where are we? Have you are presenting both documents, both reports. Musa.
Mr. President, my name is Muhammad Sani Musa, representing Niger East. I stand to second the consideration as moved by distinguished Senator Sadiq Umar. Consideration of or presentation of the reports on the Committee on Health for an act to provide for the establishment of the Federal University of Medicine and Medical Sciences, Egbe, Kogi State, and for matters connected therewith, SB 896, and for an act to amend the National Health Act number 8 of 2014 to provide for the role of private sector in the healthcare services, as moved by Senator Sadiq Umar.
Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate do receive and consider the two reports of the Committee on Health, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Chairman, you may lead the reports, please. Chairman, you may present the reports. Both reports.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, I'm Sadiq Suleiman Umar. I represent Kwara North. The Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, at its sitting on Tuesday, 1st February 2022, read for the first time the National Health Repeal and Reenactment Bill 2022 SB 603 and refers same to the Committee on Health, Secondary and Tertiary for further legislative action. The bill, sponsored by Senator Ibrahim Yaya Olori Egbe, seeks to, among others, amend the National Act number 8 of 2014 to improve quality healthcare delivery by including the participation of the private sector to ensure seamless operations of the National Council on Health, strengthen the country's capacity to adequately prepare and respond to disease outbreaks, and ensure existence of the country's response mechanism and resilience to public health emergencies. Objective of
Chief Whip.
By the existing National Health Act, which have been brought to light as a result of the global pandemic and other outbreaks or epidemics nationally and globally. An amendment of the Act, therefore, will reflect and tackle the current anticipated needs of Nigerian healthcare delivery system. Recommendations. Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, after a clause-by-clause consideration of the bill, the committee submits that its recommendations for the passage of this bill be approved by the Senate. Conclusion. The committee would like to thank the Senate President, Deputy Senate President, the entire Senate leadership, and distinguished colleagues for the opportunity given to us to serve in this capacity. Mr. President, my distinguished colleague, I also rise to present the report on the Act to provide the establishment of Federal University of Medicine and Medical Sciences, Egbe, Kogi State, and for other matters connected therewith, SB 896. The Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and is sitting on Wednesday night, February 2022, read for the second time the Federal University of Medicine and Medical Sciences, Egbe, Kogi State, Establishment Bill 2022 SB 896, and refers same to the Committee of Health and Secondary and Tertiary for further legislative action. The bill, sponsored by Senator Smart Adeyemi, seeks to, among others, establish a Federal University of Medicine and Medical Sciences, Egbe, Kogi State, for the purposes of advancing learning, higher education in the field of medicine and medical sciences, develop and offer academic and professional programs for the award of diplomas, first degrees, postgraduate, research, and higher degrees in medicine and allied professional discipline, among others. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, the objective of this bill is that the bill seeks to promote and emphasize teaching, research, and extension of knowledge in the field of medicine and medical sciences, including extension services,
outreach programs, in-service training, continuing education and adaptive research, offer academic program in relation to training of manpower in medical sciences and allied professions in Nigeria, and organize research relevant to training of manpower in medicine and medical sciences, among others. Recommendations. Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, after a clause-by-clause consideration of the bill, the committee submits that its recommendations for the passage of this bill be approved. In conclusion, once again, the committee would like to thank the Senate President, the Deputy Senate President, the entire Senate leadership, and all distinguished colleagues for the opportunity given to us to serve in this capacity. Thank you, Mr. President, for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Any comments? Leader, Committee of the Whole.
Mr. President, distinguished colleague, I move a motion for the Senate to resolve into Committee of the Whole to consider the two reports. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I rise to second the motion that the Senate resolve into Committee of the Whole to consider these two reports. I so second.
Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate resolves into Committee of the Whole to consider the two reports, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. We start with report for National Health Act number 8, 2014 Amendment Bill. Those in favor that clause 1 stands part of the bill, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that clause 2 stands part of the bill, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that clause 3 stands part of the bill, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that clause 4 citation stands part of the bill, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that the short title stands part of the bill, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that the explanatory memorandum on page 3 stands part of the bill, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor that the long title stands part of the bill, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. The second report, Federal University of Medicine and Medical Sciences, Egbe, Kogi State. Those in favor of clause 1, clause 2, clause 3, clause 4, clause 5. This is the same. Give me the same report now. It's the same report you have put here. You didn't give me that one. That's the one you gave. I'll put the question again, please. Those who are at clause 1, clause 2, clause 3, powers of the university. Clause 4. Clause 5, functions of the Pro-Chancellor. Clause 6, Clause 7, Clause 8, functions of the Senate. Clause 9, Clause 10, powers of the university to make statutes. Stand part of the bill, say aye. Those against, say nay, the ayes have it. Clause 11 is on page 12, mode of exercising power to make statutes. Those in favor at clause 11, clause 12, clause 13, clause 14, clause 15, clause 16, clause 17, appointment of external examiners, clause 18, clause 19, and clause 20. Stand part of the bill, say aye. Those against, any the ayes have it. Clause 21 is on page 19. Restriction on disposal of land by university. Those who are at clause 21, clause 22, clause 23, clause 24, clause 25, and clause 26 stand part of the bill, say aye. Those against, any the ayes have it. Those who are at interpretation on page 21 stands part of the bill, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor of the short title on page 23 stands part of the bill, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor of the schedules 1 and 2 stand part of the bill, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Those in favor of the explanatory memorandum on page 37 stands part of the bill, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Those who are the long title on page 1 stands part of the bill, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate, plenary.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I move that the Senate revert to plenary to report progress.
Minority Leader.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished colleagues, I rise to second the motion that the Senate revert to plenary to report progress. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate reverts to plenary for the chair to report progress, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. The Senate, in the Committee of the Whole, considered the report of the Committee on Health on the National Health Act number 8, 2014, Amendment Bill 2022, and approved as follows. Long title as recommended, clause 1 to 3 as recommended, short title as recommended, explanatory memorandum as recommended. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the Committee of the Whole? Thank you. The Senate, in the Committee of the Whole, also considered the report of the Committee on Health on the Federal University of Medicine and Medical Sciences, Egbe, Kogi State, Establishment Bill 2022, and approved as follows. Long title as recommended, clause 1 to 26 as recommended, interpretation as recommended, short title as recommended, schedules 1 and 2 as recommended, explanatory memorandum as recommended. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the Committee of the Whole? Thank you. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I move that the National Health Act number 8, 2014, Amendment Bill 2022 be now read the third time on all the two bills. And I also move that the National Health Act 2014 to provide for the role of private sector in the health services in order to improve private sector participation also be read for the third time. I so move.
Minority.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I rise to second the motion that these bills be now read the third time. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that these two bills be now read the third time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished members, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to amend the National Health Act number 8 of 2014 to provide for the role of private sector in the healthcare services in order to improve private sector participation in the health sector, empower the permanent secretary of the ministry to preside over the affairs of the National Council of Health in the absence of the minister, provide for health security, review the basic healthcare provision fund, and for related matters 2022 SB 603, third reading. Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to establish the Federal University of Medicine and Medical Sciences, Egbe, Kogi State, and for matters connected therewith, 2022, SB 896, third reading.
A bill for an act to amend the National Health Act number 8, 2014 to provide for the role of private sector in the healthcare services in order to improve private sector participation in the health sector, empower the permanent secretary of the ministry to preside over the affairs of the National Council on Health in the absence of the minister, provide for health security, review the basic healthcare provision fund for related matters 2022, third reading taken, and the bill is passed. A bill for an act to establish the Federal University of Medicine and Medical Sciences, Egbe, Kogi State, and for matters connected there with 2022, third reading taken, and the bill is also passed. Thank you very much. Senate Leader.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the seventh order of the day is the presentation and consideration of the report of the Committee on Judiciary, Human Rights and Legal Matters on the Court of Appeal Act, Amendment Bill 2022, SB 670. Distinguished colleagues, we recall that the bill was referred to the committee on Wednesday, 21st March 2021. Mr. President, you may wish to invite Senator Olorigwe Yahaya Ibrahim, Chairman of the committee, to move the motion for the presentation and consideration of the report. I so move.
It's supposed to be for judiciary. I think there's a mix-up. Huh? Is yours reading judiciary or health? Oh, okay. Distinguished Senator Michael Opiemi Bamidele.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am Michael Opiemi Bamidele. I represent Ekiti Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, I move that the Senate do receive and consider the report of the Committee on Judiciary, Human Rights and Legal Matters on the Court of Appeal Act 2013 Amendment Bill 2022 SB 670. Mr. President, I so move.
Distinguished Senator Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, Jeff. I represent Benue Northwest. I rise to second the motion ably moved by the Chairman of Judiciary, Human Rights and Legal Matters. I so second.
Thank you. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate do receive and consider the report of the Committee on Judiciary, Human Rights and Legal Matters on the Court of Appeal Act 2013 Amendment Bill 2022, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Chairman, you may lay the report, please. Chairman, you may present the report.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, again, Michael Okwemi Bamidele, representing Ekiti Central Senatorial District. This is the report of our committee on a bill for an act to amend the Court of Appeal Act 2013 by increasing the number of justices of the Court of Appeal from 90 to 110. Mr. President, the Court of Appeal Act 2013 Amendment Bill 2021 SB 670 was sponsored by distinguished Senator Chukwuka G. Utazi, representing Enugu North Senatorial District. The bill was read for the fourth time on Wednesday, 10th February 2021. On Wednesday, 24th, 2021, the Senate at its plenary sitting deliberated on the general principles of the bill. After extensive deliberations, the bill was read for the second time and referred to the Senate Committee on Judiciary, Human Rights and Legal Matters for further legislative action and to report back with its recommendations. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I am on page 2, briefly stating the objective of the bill. Basically, the bill seeks to increase the number of justices of the Court of Appeal from the current 90 to 110 justices. The legislative intent of this amendment is to ensure that the court has the requisite manpower to allow for creation of more divisions of the court and to bring the court closer to litigants in line with the current realities, aimed at expediting dispensation of justice. This is necessary in order to eliminate delay in the justice delivery system as it relates to the adjudicatory powers of the court in tandem with its appellate jurisdiction. This proposed amendment undoubtedly is targeted at reducing the workload of the court and enhance its effective performance. I proceed to page 6 to talk about the findings and observations of our committee. Mr. President, our observations and findings flowing from the submissions and presentations made by stakeholders and the general public on this proposed legislation, and having analyzed same in our subsequent markup sessions on the bill, our committee hereby makes the following observations and findings. 1, that the stakeholders were unanimous in their support for the passage of the bill because of its systemic and strategic relevance to the justice sector reform, aimed at bringing justice as well as access to justice closer to the people. 2, that the amendments sought by this bill, if eventually enacted as an act of the National Assembly, will ultimately reduce the docket of the Court of Appeal, as well as stimulate quick dispensation of justice. 3, that one of the salient provisions of the new improvement on this bill is the aspect that seeks to integrate virtual court proceedings, which has become an integral part of our court proceedings in recent time. This is also in line with the guidelines given to courts by the Chief Justice of Nigeria, and a welcome development as justice will no longer be delayed due to unforeseen situations like the COVID-19 pandemic that stalled judicial activities during its ravaging period. Number 4, that the proposed new amendment also seeks to align the provisions of the Extant Act with the provisions of the Nigerian Correctional Services Act, which was enacted as an act of the National Assembly in 2019. And finally, that the bill, as amended, seeks to formalize the convention of having 5-member panel of justices to hear election appeals and issues on appeal that are novel, uncertain, and recondite. Our recommendation, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the Senate Committee on Judiciary, Human Rights and Legal Matters, to which this bill was referred, having favorably considered same, recommends as follows: that the Senate do consider and pass the Court of Appeal Act 2013 Amendment Bill 2022 as amended. I so move, Mr. President, and I thank Mr. President and our colleagues for the opportunity to serve in this regard. Thank you so much.
Any comments? Committee of the Whole, Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I move that the Senate resolve into Committee of the Whole to consider the report. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I rise to second the motion that the Senate resolve to Committee of the Whole to consider this report. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that clause 1, clause 2, clause 3 on page 2, clause 4, clause 5, clause 6, clause 7, clause 8, clause 9, clause 10, stand part of the bill say aye. Those against any, the ayes have it. Clause 11 is on page 6. Those who are at clause 11, clause 12, clause 13, clause 14, clause 15, and clause 16, stand part of the bill say aye. Those against any, the ayes have it. Those involved at the interpretation stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those involved at the short title on page 13 stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those involved at the explanatory memorandum on page 13 stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Those involved at the long title on page 1 stands part of the bill say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I move that we revert to plenary and report reports.
Minority Leader.
Mr. Chair, I second the motion that we revert to plenary to report progress. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate reverts to plenary for the chair to report progress say aye. Those against any, the ayes have it. The Senate in the Committee of the Whole considered the report of the Committee on Judiciary, Human Rights and Legal Matters on the Court of Appeal Act 2013 Amendment Bill 2022 and approved as follows. Long title as recommended, clause 1 to 16 as recommended, interpretation as recommended, short title as recommended, explanatory memorandum as recommended. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the Committee of the Whole? Thank you. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I move that the Court of Appeal Act Amendment Bill 2022 be now read the third time. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I rise to second the motion that this bill be now read the third time. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that this bill be now read the third time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to amend the Court of Appeal Act 2013 by increasing the number of justices of the Court of Appeal from 90 to 110, and for other related matters 2022, SB 670, third reading.
A bill for an act to amend the Court of Appeal Act 2013 by increasing the number of justices of the Court of Appeal from 90 to 110 and for other related matters 2022, third reading taken, and the bill is passed. Thank you very much. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the eighth order of the day is a motion standing on the name of Senator Sankara Abdullahi on the urgent need for humanitarian support and assistance to victims of flooding across the country, especially Jigawa State. Mr. President, I wish to invite Senator Sankara Abdullahi to move the motion. I so move.
Sorry, Leader, what did you say? Who moves the motion? Oh. Distinguished Senator Eladi Sankara.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. My name is Senator Eladi Abdullahi Sankara, representing Jigawa Northwest. Mr. President, urgent need for humanitarian support and assistance to victims of flooding in the whole country, especially Jigawa State. Note that with concern, the devastating impact of flooding part of Jigawa State resulting for heavy rain sometime in August 2022. Aware that flooding has caused the death of about 100 persons and displaced of thousands of persons, including women and children. Also aware that flooding washed away bridges, roads, farmland, and over 150 houses resident in the affected local government area at Ringing Emirate, Kazaure Emirate, Gumal Emirate, Dusab Emirate, and Hadija Emirate of Jigawa State. Observe that the victim of disaster now take shelter in poorly organized center like school buildings not affected by the flood. Worry that the major part of the affected local government area are still submerged with state emergency response agency not being able to handle the disaster alone. Concern that the urgent medical and humanitarian assistance are not deployed to the affected victim. A major health challenge may result from the disaster. Accordingly resolved as follows. Direct the NEMA to coordinate with the State Emergency Management Agency, especially in Jigawa State, with a view to urgently provide humanitarian assistance to affected flood ravaged area of the country. Number 2, urge the relevant agency to provide timely early warning to flood-prone area with a view of forestalling the loss of lives and property. I so move, Mr. President.
Distinguished colleagues, actually this motion, last week, the deputy minority leader wanted to present a similar motion, Senator Isa Shaibulau, and some other colleagues as well. So there are so many co-sponsors, and I want them to be recognized as co-sponsors. I don't know whether you had any discussions with some of them. Senator Dalari Sankara.
Yes, Mr. President. He met me this morning and he told me that he has a similar motion in which tally with my motion. So he just allowed me to move. He allowed me to move for your necessary action.
No, but you had want to also include the co-sponsors. And so there is a long list of those senators who wanted to present similar motion. I know many contacted me even last week and yesterday too, and I said, no, Senator, one of you will be presenting. So I want us to, we should read the list of co-sponsors. Distinguished, let me guide this thing. Senator Shaibu Isalo was the one that should have presented this motion you are presenting. But because the other paper came with their own, we said the list he had will now be co-sponsors. So I will read out the list and then you can add so that we do justice to everyone. So I have a list here. The co-sponsors will be Senator Shaibu Isalo, Senator Aishatu Dahiru Adama Central, Senator Binos Dauda Yaro, Senator Ishaku Eliaisha Abo, Senator Emmanuel Boacha, Senator Yusuf A. Yusuf, Senator Gabriel Suswam, Senator Emmanuel Okejef, Senator Abo Moro, Senator Smata Ademi, Senator Yakubu Oseni, Senator Jibrin Isa of Kogi East. Now you can add. Huh? Okay, list all those that are resident. Senator Kabirga, Senator Shaib.
Yeah, I include almost everybody here, Mr. President, and also, especially, I can just call Senator Kabirga is included, and also Baraj Jibrin, which is everybody here, Mr. President.
Okay. The Songwe Senator, no, you don't have to approach the chair. Let me solve this problem. Senator Dalari Sankara, you're the main sponsor. All of us, all 108, maybe you can take me out. No, it's okay, you can take me out. But even the DSP, you start with DSP's name. Everywhere there is flood. Everybody's name is there. Is that okay? Okay. You can now, have you moved the motion? Senator Abi Salo. Where is he? Senator Aisha too, Dairu. Yeah, I call your name. Do you want to contribute? Because you talked to me, wanted to present a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues. Aisha Tudairu Ahmed Binani, representing Adama Central. Mr. President, the issue of flooding in this country is a seasonal something. It's something that we always experience year in, year out. And I think it's high time the government look at it and come up with a lasting solution. Like in my area, that's the Northeast and most of the state, if the federal government will take up this issue of dredging of this River Benue up to the Lagdo with the understanding of this of the Cameroon government, I think it will solve the problem once and for all, because it's not in our interest to be asking the NEMA or humanitarian give us this foodstuff beddings to take to our people. We hate seeing our people suffering every year. So let's get a lasting solution to that effect. And also, Mr. President, I want to call on the Ministry of Water Resources. I don't know what is happening to the buffer dam at Dasin. This Dasin dam that's supposed to have been constructed long ago. To my understanding, approval has been given. So what has been holding it, I don't know. So I think the chairman, Senate Committee on Water Resources, maybe that committee should look into that and come up with why is that Dasin dam is not constructed up to now, because what we are looking at is a lasting solution, not that every year in, year out we come here and say NEMA should give us relief material, humanitarian should give. That's not what we are looking. That's not what we are asking for. But in the meantime, before that one will come, we urge that the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs should look into that and assist our people. Thank you very much.
Senator Binos Dauda.
Thank you, Mr. President. Binos Yaro, Adamawa South. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, you recall that I too approached you last week with the view to presenting a motion on a similar matter. As a matter of fact, I consulted all the senators through whose states River Benue passes, and that is the names that you called out there. Mr. President, the problem we are having, just as my distinguished colleague has said, the problem really has to do with the dam in Cameroon, Lagdo Dam, which when it is full to capacity, they release water. And that water causes overflowing across the Benue Valley, all the way to Lokoja. And the only permanent solution is to dredge the river. If you dredge the river, it will be deeper, it will hold more water. And secondly, there's a need to construct buffer dams like the one she's mentioning. When that Lagbo Dam was constructed in the 80s, the agreement was that a buffer dam on the Adamawa side of that dam will be constructed. That is the Dasin Hausa Dam. A similar one was to be constructed on the Cameroon side. You know, without those buffer dams, every time there is release of water from Lagbo Dam, even from Kiri Dam in Adamawa State, the Benue River will be overflowing. It happened in 2012. The damage was too much, and it is happening again this year. Over the weekend, I went home, I took a boat ride to some of the communities in my constituency affected by this flooding. It is heart-rending. You will find villages
totally submerged. You'll find school infrastructure submerged, you know. So it is something that, like my colleague said, it is not a question of just bring relief materials. We need to solve the problem, and the solution is dredge the river and also construct buffer dams. I so submit.
Senator Kabirga.
Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I am Kabiru Gaya, represent the people of Kano South from Kano State. Mr. President, I would like to commend Senator Sankara for bringing the motion and also commend the Senate President for including us as co-sponsors of this motion. Mr. President, most of the states, Jigawa, Jigawa, Yobe, Ibom, Borno, and other parts of the states along the river Kano are all affected due to the overflow of Tiga Dam. Tiga Dam was designed to take a capacity of 2 billion liters of water, but because of a lot of sand pouring into the dam, it has reduced its capacity to only 1.6 billion liters of water. So therefore, any water above that capacity will certainly have to go through the spillway. And I wrote a letter to Mr. President on this effect, and the Minister of Water Resources and myself were asked to go to Kano to inspect the Tiga Dam and the damage caused by the rain. So, Mr. President, when we were there, we saw that the Tiga Dam was overspilling at high velocity, and that is causing the submersion of many rivers, especially many houses along the rivers, and many farmlands. Thousands of farmlands were covered. Thousands of farmlands.
Order.
I'm telling the chief. So, Mr. President.
Please, those at the back. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. So most of these villages in Kano State are all along within my Centauri area, and therefore we realize that this thing, the most important is on the prayer 2, which he demanded NEMA to support the victims at that area. And based on our discussion with NEMA, they said that they are sending a team immediately to go and assess the damages along those riversides in those states, Kano, Bauchi, Jigawa, Yobe, and so on, because the water spills out to Lake Chad. So, Mr. President, I support this motion, and I believe that the government has to also take measures in trying to desilt our dams after the rainy season. Otherwise, any kind of excess water will now be causing to this flooding, and the houses along the river were built by people thinking that water will not come through that pass again, because for 30 years the water has not reached any high level to prevent them from building houses there. So, Mr. President, I'm appealing that the government had to try and desilt our dams and also expand our waterways in such a way that when it happens, at least people may not be seriously affected. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Deputy Chief Whip, distinguished colleagues, many hands are up, so I will advise that we try to be as please brief as possible so that we take everyone.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I'm Aliu Sabi Abdullahi. Let me join my other colleagues, especially the last speaker, to commend the mover of this motion. Mr. President, my intervention will be in two fronts. First, of course, I represent Niger North, and the spate of flooding, my senatorial district did not also escape, in the sense that...
Chief Whip, please. No, you are the one that is supposed to call everybody to order. Now you are the one collecting people to one place. You may continue, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, like I said, my senatorial district was not also spared in the sense that Kontagora, the headquarters of my senatorial district, had very massive flooding in a manner that they've never seen for so many years. Lives were lost, properties were destroyed, and livelihood were massively affected. In fact, it was along a route where there were graveyards. Bodies of people were actually exhumed as a result of that. It was a really terrible sight. But Mr. President, beyond the events that we are all, reporting, I think the fundamental point I want to bring here is to say that this massive flooding we are seeing is the result of this climate change we have been talking about. And of course, every one of us will agree that technically and rightly so, where the so-called green gases are being emitted and whatnot in the industrial centers, we at this other end, we are the ones receiving the impact, while those who are destroying the environment are somewhere. So, Mr. President, I think this brings me to one very fundamental issue that has been raised in the international arena for debate. That is the debt cancellation or forgiveness. Because if you look at what is happening, based on this last speaker, for example, the entire stretch from Kano down to Yobe and all these other areas that are flooded, this year they are not having their harvest. Those areas where there are lowlands, they plant rice, the rice and all their harvest is being washed off. So I think we cannot sit here complaining about the impact of this flooding, which is as a result of climate change, and those who are causing this climate change are somewhere at the other end. So I think I want us to really look at this issue. As a nation, we should support that, yes, it's time to review this issue of debt burden on us. Because the remedies, for example, the silting, or even, what did they call it, expanding the drainage areas, these are all heavy infrastructure work requiring finance. So, Mr. President, I want us to look at this, but most importantly also, in the local areas, most of the drains are not being deseated. These are public works that are usually done by the local government areas, and today we know these things are not happening. So I think, Mr. President, we need to look at these issues holistically so that we can provide a solution. With all of this, Mr. President, I urge that perhaps we should take a much more wider view of how to address these flooding issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Barrow Jibrin, I represent Kano North. Mr. President, flooding this year is everywhere. Everywhere, including my senatorial zone. And we all know that it's the effect of climate change. A lot has been said. You may not be surprised if this repeats itself next year. Now what do? We can't stop at lamentation. Yes, we are lamenting, but we need to be proactive. We must be proactive. The effect of climate change is here with us. Nobody knows when it's going to stop. It might continue to go on and on and on and on. Therefore, we must take measures to make sure that we are able to deal with this reality. It's a reality. We cannot run away from it. What are we doing in our budgetary system to find solution to these problems? A lot has been said about the silting dams, creating or expanding our waterways and so on and so forth. Are we taking action to make sure that happens? So we should begin to look at ways and means of making sure whatever happens in the future is contained. Therefore, ministries that have the statutory functions of dealing with these matters should be called to begin to act. Ministry of Water Resources and other allied ministries should begin to plan on how to deal with these problems. How do we find solutions to this problem? How do we deseal? How do we expand our waterways? And so on and so forth. I don't want to go to specific areas. A lot has been said about that. But what we need to do, as I said, The budget is going to be brought to the National Assembly in a few weeks to come or a few days to come.
Order.
The ministries involved, have they taken action to make sure that we find solution to this problem? If they have not, they should do that. And I want to call on committees on Committee on Water Resources, Committee on Works and other allied committees to scrutinize the submissions that are going to be brought by the various ministries, or to check the budget and areas related to them to make sure that all these issues are dealt with. All these issues are captured in those areas, in those budgetary provisions, so that we can make sure that next year we wouldn't face this kind of problem. Mr. President, I so submit.
Distinguished Senator Ahmad Babakaita, I thought you raised your hand.
I raised my hand. Mr. President, colleagues, let me first start by commiserating with the affected senators and constituencies. Like Barao Jibril had said, this is all over. I had cause to go around my constituency this weekend. In fact, I'm just returning, and what I saw was devastating. And so it's a general thing. And the only problem with our system is that we don't mitigate on issues to when they happen. Most of the weather forecasts that the world over has indicated that we will continue to have excessive rains this lately. And I thought that would have been a wake-up call for all of us and the government to do the right thing at the right time. Now it's almost too late. We're talking of flooding that will continue to happen with our dams. And most of them, like we understand, is that they have been silted, so they need to be desilted. And the worst part of it is that most of these major dams have, usually in their construction, have reservoirs. The reservoir was meant to, if there is an excessive rain and there is flooding, it's for them to open so that we can drain it out. Like what happened in Tiga. It's not that there was flooding initially, but because the dam was full and the edge has to be open for the water to go, that was the same water that ran into the community and overrun them. So if you had had something in place before the rains, I'm sure we would have saved those communities. So, Mr. President, this issue is a very big, massive issue. It's not a joke. If you have to do something, we have to get our climate committee, our water resources, and make sure that we forecast, because I am not sure, I don't know, but what I heard is that the rain that we'll be expecting next year will be twice what we have seen. And for Christ's sake, we know that all our houses, 80% of our houses in Nigeria are mud houses. Like I told you earlier on, that when I saw it was devastating and it was widespread, so you can't even make any impact. Coincidentally, yesterday at the airport while I was leaving Kano, I met the DG Mustafa Habib of NEMA, and he told me that he's coming to do the assessment in Jigawa, Kano, and other things. I said, so what happened with Katsina? He said, well, they are taken to the priority areas. So please, what I want to do, or what I want to advise here is that since this thing is widespread, and we all know that it's widespread, we should make sure that we take each and every constituency, do assessment, and help them based on the means of government. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Nicholas Tofomo.
Thank you, sir, my Senate President. I'm very happy that you've called me. If we look at River Niger and River Benue, we should not just limit it to Nigeria. River Niger took its source from Mali, and it passed through Niger Republic to Nigeria. And if you look at River Benue, it has a link with Cameroon. So there are 4 countries involved. So my own view is that the 4 countries should come together and work out a flowing strategy, so that when it's flowing from Mali to Niger Republic, by the time it gets to Nigeria, it should have been properly managed. But because there are no links within these 4 countries, that is why you have this flood everywhere. And Nigeria is at the receiving end. If you look at Lokoja, where River Benue and River Niger meets the confluence town, you will see that the flood extends to more than 30 kilometers. And it has been like that for more than 40, 50 years. So we should put sentiment apart. Let these 4 countries come together under the management of ECOWAS. We need the intervention of ECOWAS, because if you look at Niger Delta, there is flood everywhere. In Bayelsa, in Delta, in Ondo State, even in Akwa Ibom, it's everywhere. So let us involve ECOWAS to intercede and assist us, so that we can control this flooding once and for all and get a good result. Thank you.
Senator Sadiq Suleiman.
Thank you, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues. I am Sadiq Suleiman Umar. I represent Kwara North. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I join my colleagues to express the pain citizens in this country are suffering from the current flooding and what has always happened year in, year out. But I particularly want to register that the pain in my senatorial district, from Moro local government to Patigi to Edu, is better imagined than experienced. While I associate myself with the long-term solutions as articulated here today, I still think that an immediate solution to help our people will be very, very useful. I therefore urge us all to make NEMA to try to come to the aid of our people, because the suffering is too much. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senate President, for this opportunity. Thank you, distinguished colleagues. My name is Senator Ishaku Abo. I represent the good people of Adamawa North. Mr. President, the issue of flooding, which is attendant consequences, is really there for all to see, more especially along the Benue Toro. Particularly, Mr. President, sir, Michika, Madagali, particularly Madagali axis in Adamawa Northern Central District today is completely cut off from Adamawa State. Not only the issue of their houses being destroyed, their bridges are also being washed off, culverts being washed off. You cannot cross again to some local governments in the senatorial district. Beyond looking at long-term solution, Mr. President, I call for the inclusion of the entire senatorial district, not only in the emergency intervention, because the farmers in those areas have lost their crops because it's washed away by rain, meaning that next year there will be hunger. Mr. President, while we are looking for solution, we shall look beyond just one-off supply of food and relief materials. Let's look how we can sustain them, because the problem is there. Also, Mr. President, beyond just Senate resolution, NEMA alone don't have the capacity to handle these problems. I am a member of the Senate Committee on Special Duties. We oversee NEMA, and we know the budget that they have. It is not enough, Mr. President, for them to take care of these problems. Other agencies, like the Ecological Fund, like NEDC, for example, in the Northeast, that are recipient of Ecological Fund, should also come in to reconstruct some of these culverts so that people can be able to move. And I suggest that let's have an all-inclusive inter-agency collaboration, not just NEMA, in solving these problems. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Said Al-Ghali.
Thank you, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues. My name is Senator Said Al-Ghali, and I represent Gombe North. Mr. President, I don't want to repeat what the previous speakers have said on this issue. And what I had wanted us to consider was submitted by Senator Abo in his last paragraph. But for the purpose of emphasis and recap, Mr. President, this is appropriation period. I strongly submit the Committee on Agriculture alongside with that of Humanitarian Affairs need to consider a very whopping appropriation to see how we can have a social intervention program to assist our local farmers who lost their yield because of this flood disaster. I so submit, Mr. President.
Senator Abomoro.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Senator Abamoro. I represent the very good people of the Benue South Senatorial District. Mr. President, I think this motion wouldn't have come at a better time. And with your magnanimity, everybody concerned has become a sponsor of this bill, of this motion. Mr. President, with particular reference to the Benue Valley, and even with all incidents of flooding in this country, it has become a perennial occurrence. And every year, year in, year out, NIMET issues warnings to Nigerians as to impending floodings across the country. And this year also wasn't an exception. And like my colleague, Senator Abo has said, I think that we should look beyond merely advocating for the provision of relief materials that are not sustainable and look at areas that we can solve the problem of flooding or minimize the problem of flooding. All the states along the Benue Valley have always been vulnerable to flooding. And usually it is as a result of the discharge of water from the Lagdo Dam in the Republic of Cameroon that overflows and sometimes into the Kiri Dam in Adamawa State, and they discharge and reach a very critical level, and because of the low channel capacity of River Benue, it overflows and destroys properties and farm lands. So, Mr. President, I think that for the purpose of those states along the Benue River Valley, a dredging of River Benue would definitely provide a very lasting solution. Mr. President, this is not the first time that the dredging of River Benue has been advocated. But I think for one reason or the other, it has not been done. And that is the main reason why we continue to have flooding in these areas year in, year out, dislocating farmers and farmlands all the time. And so, Mr. President, I think that we should consider the dredging of River Benue for the purpose of ameliorating the problem of flooding in those areas. Thank you, Mr. President.
Distinguished colleagues, before we go to the prayers, let me also make my comments on the flooding. This has turned into a national tragedy, really, because there is no part of our country that has not been flooded today. That is to say, this season. And this has come with serious consequences of loss of lives, loss of farmlands and crops, loss of very vital infrastructure, loss of houses, and communities have been terribly affected across the country. And that's why this motion is a unity motion, so to speak. Every member of this Senate is a sponsor of this motion. In my senatorial district, and indeed in Yobe State, we have taken a hit because the way Tiga Dam is managed by the authorities there is not the best way to manage a dam. Normally, water will be kept. When those of us downstream will need it, they will not release it. And when the dam is filled up and then threatens to burst the structures, then they will just release it. And this is what has happened. Tiga Dam was opened because it was going to break. There was so much water in it. And from Jigawa, actually from Bauchi, from Zaki local government in Bauchi, downstream Yobe, up to some parts of Borno, including Damasak in Borno State, neighboring Niger, all of us were affected. In Yobe, we lost so many roads. In fact, about 11 or 12 of our local governments out of the 17 are no more reachable through our normal regular roads because the roads have been cut by flood. So it's beyond just taking blankets and food stuff for now. I believe that our colleagues who are saying we should do better than going with food stuff by NEMA and the rest of it. First, climate change is a reality. It's a reality because whatever we do in Nigeria, this climate change is universal, is global, and it will rain so heavily that from Guinea Highlands, where the river Niger starts, will pass through, of course, Mali, Niger, and then down to our country up to the Niger Delta. So that is something that we cannot control. And by the way, Niger has not been, in our understanding or agreement with Niger, they are not supposed to dam River Niger. Because if they do, we'll be under serious trouble. We can't run the Kainji, the hydroelectricity that we have. So it means it is still our responsibility here in Nigeria to ensure that we not only dam, but we manage our dams properly. And desilting is necessary because in most parts of River Hadeja, that is a river that flows from Kano down to Bauchi, but down to Yobe, up to Borno, and up to Lake Chad, that it used to contribute so much. Now, because of the silting, the river does not reach Lake Chad anymore. It disappears because the channels have been silted. So we need to desilt, just like Senator Binos Yaro was saying, that you desilt Benue, but that's not the only river we need to desilt. There are so many rivers in our country that we need to desilt, so that the channels will be able to contain the water that will flow in. Amendment to the prayers or additional prayers to ensure that everybody is captured in this. Prayer 1, direct the NEMA to coordinate with states' emergency management agencies, especially in Jigawa State, with a view to urgently provide humanitarian assistance to the affected flood-ravaged areas of the country. Those, okay, amendment. Distinguished Senator Binosa Rododa.
Thank you, Mr. President. I propose that we amend the motion to read, direct NEMA in consultation with state governments to urgently carry out a comprehensive assessment of communities affected by flooding across the country with a view to providing them with relief materials. I so move.
To second, Senator Aisha Ahmed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Aisha Ahmed Binani, representing Adama Central. I second the amendment of the prayers as moved by Senator Bino Sierra. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of prayer 1 as amended, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 2, urge the relevant agencies to provide timely early warning to flood-prone areas with a view to forestalling the loss of lives and property. Amendment, the Deputy Chief Whip.
Sorry. I want to amend that. Sorry. Aliu Sabi Abdullahi, Niger North. I want to amend this instead of just the relevant agencies. We know it's the Nigerian Meteorological Agency, Nigerian Hydrological Agency. These are the core agencies with mandate on this, what he's asking for. So rather than leaving it vague, we should just bring those two agencies that have responsibility. And usually they actually issue this early warning, but we don't know the extent to which it gets down. So I think I would like to accordingly amend, urge the Nigerian Meteorological Agency and the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency, okay, and other relevant agencies to provide timely early warnings to flood-prone areas with a view to forestalling the loss of lives and property. I so move.
I need a seconder. The Deputy Senate Leader, Distinguished Professor Robert Ajayi Borofes.
Distinguished colleagues, I rise to support the amendment proposed by my colleague.
Thank you very much. Those in favor of prayer 2 as amended, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. But what do we do with our climate change agency or as a country? Because we need to also empower the office that deals with climate change, because there's certainly need to look at that direction. This is a climate change matter as well. No, there is a law already. We have our committee on climate change, chaired by Senator Lawali Anka. The same way Senator Ishaku Abo. Yes.
Direct relevant agencies to reconstruct broken down bridges, culverts, and roads immediately. Thank you.
Instead of saying relevant agencies, maybe we look at FEMA, we look at Federal Ministry of Works. I don't know whether there are other agencies that can help fix the roads, because in my state we need to fix, the federal government has to help us fix the roads. Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development. Yes. FEMA,
and because NEMA doesn't construct now.
Because if you say NEDC, you should bring in NNDC as well. Do you understand? But they are supposed to do this even if nobody talks to them, because these are their areas, but we can include them. What about the military? Can the military help fix roads? Yeah.
They are their Corps of Engineers, so we can also bring the in here.
Okay, so put this thing.
Additional prayer, direct relevant agencies such as FEMA, NEDC, NDDC, NEMA, Rural Development Department of Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Works, and other relevant agencies to reconstruct washed out roads, bridges, and culverts.
I need a seconder. Distinguished Senator Kola Balogun.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Kola Balogun, Oyo South, I rise to support the amendment as ably moved by my colleague. I so second, Mr. President.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the additional prayer, say aye. Those against any, there is any additional prayer? Distinguished colleagues, thank you very much for the various interventions. Senate Leader, I think we can stand down the remaining items on the other paper till another legislative day.
Okay, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I move that the 4 bills, concurrence bills, be stood down to another legislative. I so move.
Minority Leader.
I rise second that all other items to step down for other legislative day.
Well, thank you very much. Before I put the question, I just want to remind members of the committee, ad hoc committee on non-compliance with the Petroleum Act and oil mining lease, and the members, the chairman, Senator Aliyu Sabi Abdullahi, Senator George Thompson Sekibo, Senator Yahya Abdullahi, Senator Albert Basi Akpan, Senator Solomon Olamilekong Adiola, Senator Smart Adeyemi, and Senator Aisha A. Dahiru, that your inauguration comes up at 2 p.m. Is it, Chairman? 2 p.m. Okay. And there is also, sorry, 3:01. Another letter is Presidential Campaign Council PCC, and that is for the APC. Letter of invitation to the National Interfaith Campaign Prayer and Road Show. The Presidential Campaign Council hereby invites all distinguished senators to an interfaith prayer session for our presidential candidate, Ashwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, his running mate, Senator Kashim Shatima, and our beloved nation. The event is slated for Wednesday, 28th of September 2022 by 8 a.m. at the Presidential Campaign Headquarters on Herbert Macaulay Way, Central Business District, Abuja. Please note that the prayer session will be capped with a unity walk from the PCC headquarters to the Unity Fountain, Maitama, Abuja. Kindly create time out of your busy schedule to join in this all-important occasion. PDP senators are hereby graciously invited to participate, including obedience. They are also invited. Sorry? 8 a.m. 8 a.m. Sorry? Well, this letter has been sent to me. It was signed yesterday, so nobody has told me it has been postponed. If it is postponed, I'm sure it will be there in the media. If it is postponed, then it's another, we'll wait for another time to be communicated. Or this, the question is, the Senate, it's adjournment, right? No, you stand down the consideration of other. Okay. Those in favor of the motion that we stand down the consideration of the remaining items on the order paper till another legislative day, say aye. Those against say nay, the ayes have it. Leader of the Senate, adjournment. So, this, Senator Abomoro, this is hate speech. Leader of the Senate.
It's hate speech, I agree.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I hereby move that the Senate do adjourn till Wednesday, 28 September 2022 at 10 a.m. from.
Minority Leader.
I hereby second that all Senate do adjourn on Wednesday to 28 September 28th.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate do adjourn till tomorrow, Wednesday, the 28th day of September 2022 at 10 a.m. say aye. Those against say nay, the ayes have it. The Senate is hereby adjourned till tomorrow, Wednesday, the 28th day of September 2022 at 10 a.m. prompt.